Hello and welcome. I'm Jade Dupree, content producer and host for the Upstream Content Studio. We are pleased to host today's webinar in partnership with Kongsberg Digital, entitled The Operating Model of the Future, Leaving Uncertainty Behind. Today's webinar is the second part in the first wave of Kongsberg Digital's executive series to showcase why and how leaders must rethink digital transformation and advance towards the operating model of the future. Once again, we have Havard Ostenson leading the conversation as the moderator. He's the Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer at Kongsberg Digital and responsible for the execution of the company's global commercial strategy. With more than 17 years of experience in the integrated gas, LNG, and upstream industry, Havard is very well equipped to lead this discussion. Our speaker panel consists of two speakers. We have Grant Christie, Vice President of Business Transformation at Kongsberg Digital. He has over 30 years of expertise in senior leadership and strategy roles. He has been praised for being a visionary team builder in the energy industry and has been involved in developing the digital blueprint for LNG Canada. Joining Havard and Grant is Neela Mark. Neela is the Asset of the Future lead for LNG Canada, and her focus is on establishing a future-proof organization and business model that delivers immense value from first cargo and sets a foundation for an innovative culture. Neela holds a degree in mechanical engineering from Dalhousie University. Now, before I hand over to Havard, I would like to remind our viewers that there is an option to submit questions for the Q&A set throughout this webinar. If your question isn't addressed during today's session, we will hand the questions onto Kongsberg Digital to answer afterwards. From all of us here at the Upstream Content Studio, we hope you find this webinar insightful. Now it's my pleasure to hand over to Havard.
Thank you, Jade, for the introduction. Today's discussion will continue to build on the first webinar in our executive series that shared knowledge and insights regarding why industry leaders are embracing digital performance models to execute their digital vision, to grow their business value, and transform businesses in response to the increasing pressure to become greener while ensuring profitability, sustainability, and a license to operate. Today's webinar will discuss exactly how industry players are leaping ahead in achieving double-digit hard return on asset gains with the operating model of the future. Forward-thinking companies are leaving digital uncertainty behind and replacing today's tactical approach to digital with a strategic and holistic digital performance model approach that allows them to scale meaningfully and achieve an order of magnitude change in their return on assets. In this spirit, today's discussion will include LNG Canada's story on how they are transforming to a DPM, including discussion on challenges, wins, the people journey, aha moments, and advice for other companies in putting such a DPM in place. So to kick things off, let's talk a little bit about why DPMs are being embraced by industry leaders to execute on their digital vision. We, in the first webinar, we discussed why the market isn't further ahead with digitalization, and specifically how a digital performance model will enable companies to achieve that digital promise. Grant, to set the stage for today, could you share exactly what is a digital operating model? And please summarize from our previous discussion why a digital performance model is so valuable.
Yeah, certainly. So in the last discussion and through our work with clients, we've come up with an approach to look at an organization, so that their operating model looks at their structure, their technology stack, their processes, their metrics, performance management dialogues, and their governance. How will that work as a system? And then how digital technology can help enhance and drive transparency. So from the executive level to the asset to the front line. So we use digital tooling and where digital is extremely strong in driving that transparency. But also we use it to drive faster, higher quality decisions. So identifying patterns, driving through actions, through outcome. And the key pieces and the differentiator is in that digital operating model, not only having insight on the performance required to the actual results, but also closing the loop from decisions right from the pattern action to the outcome and delivery of the results. So that's in essence what we talked about, the digital performance model, what it is, and the benefits we talked about in the last webinar of how to get that set up and what it delivers for our clients and potentially for the rest of the industry.
Thank you. So it definitely then is more than just data or sort of looking at the promise of data alone or AI as a standalone capability. This seems like it is much more structured towards performance and what keeps driving industry forward. So turning to you, Neela, you're deeply involved in the industry implementing these things. Could you help us understand from your perspective as someone who would onboard these constructs into the organization, why does that make a difference in terms of value?
Yeah, I mean, I think the value is being able to pull it all together into a really cohesive, coherent outcome. So we talk about AI, we talk about value through data, data-driven decision making, but what do we really mean? What is truly kind of the end goal in all of that? And it is what Grant said, it is getting really, really great at rapid, high quality decision making. And that is delivered through data. It can be augmented and leveraged through things like AI. But how we go from, what are our processes doing to deliver outcomes? What is the data doing? How are we moving data through those processes to actually get those insights and where we need them? And then what are the people doing with it on the other side? So how are the systems delivering that information and those insights? And then what really is happening thereafter? It could all come together really great. We could, gain the data insights that we are looking for, could drive us toward a specific outcome from a decision perspective. But if in the end, the people in the organization don't really accept that, don't drive it, don't leverage it, and don't nurture it to ensure that it remains healthy, then we're not going to get those outcomes that we're looking for. So looking at it holistically, it's how it all comes together from one end to the other to really drive value.
It's really, I'm just reflecting on the sort of the questions that you're posing there. Those questions are starting to sound much more like the questions that executives that we're facing when we're presenting a digital solution or any type of solutions would ask, i.e., how do I drive performance? How is this going to help me, drive a better outcome for my organization? So it really is interesting to see how digital is sort of taking up that space. So Neela, could you help us sort of describe the audience or for our audience, what is the scope of the LNG Canada facility and sort of what phase you're in today and when you started deploying the digital performance model?
Absolutely. So LNG Canada is an organization that's building the first liquefaction facility on the west coast of Canada, on the traditional territory of the Haisla First Nation. So we're building a 14 million ton per annum train facility. There's 2 trains actually that deliver that of 7 each. And we're going to be sending all of that LNG to Asian markets. So we'll be taking traditionally landlocked gas from British Columbia, sending it through a 670 kilometer pipeline, cooling it down in a giant refrigerator, if I'm going to get really specific, and actually moving that into a big cooler. So we have an LNG storage tank on site that we store the LNG in before we put it on cargoes. And to give you an idea on the size, and this is a very scientific measure, that cooler is about 60,000 elephants in size. So that's how many elephants we can fit in there. It's then moved through loading arms onto our LNG cargo ships and sent to the market.
That's really helpful context. That's a lot of elephants, first of all. You know, it helps us appreciate the complexity, and obviously managing that type of setup, you know, in such it must be a vast amount of complexity to manage gas coming in, the liquefaction process, the cargo offload, and making all that work. So then, you know, it sort of makes sense that taking the perspective of a holistic operating model with digital, you know, it would play a role there. So Grant, obviously you have a lot of experience with these types of projects in terms of deploying digital to this level of complexity. You know, what's your experience in doing so? How would you go about deploying a digital performance model, and what are some key things to think about when doing so?
Yeah, so when we start working with clients like LNG Canada, the first step is to really to look at their operating model in terms of their structure and the components, and really build a blueprint that helps them achieve the objectives that they're after. So and to LNG Canada's credit, they've done a great foundational set of work around their organizational structure, and started to think about the personas and how and what they wanted to achieve. And they had very crystal clear understanding of, given their remote location, the operating model that they wanted and needed to apply in order to achieve, not just the first LNG facility on the west coast of Canada, but a world-class LNG facility. So the other point, and maybe Neely, you can jump in here. The other really interesting thing that LNGC did through this blueprinting exercise is they brought us in quite early. So we were engaging around the digital design through the beginning of their construction phase. So and maybe Neely, you can talk about how whether that timing was too early, too late, how that felt for you. But I know for the industry and what's happening now is that whole conversation, that blueprinting exercise is really starting to move upstream into the design phase. So not just thinking how to operate and bring in the digital twin on how to get a great operating asset, but also starting to think of how do I design an asset fundamentally so that it can be operated digitally. So maybe Neely, you can tell us about your thoughts on the timing.
Yeah, certainly. So, and I probably should have touched on that already. So LNG Canada is not actually, in fact, operating yet. We are hoping for first cargo sometime mid-2025, and that's what we're working towards. We actually started this journey back toward the end of 2019, long before we had a physical asset on location. And we did it exactly what you described, Grant. We really got specific about who do we want to be when we grow up. Given, where we are from a maturity perspective with technology, with digitalization, how we utilize data, what is it that we're striving for? And we created that blueprint. So ultimately where we started was, what is the information we need to know to make good quality decisions for our asset, for our organization? How are we getting that data? Where is it coming from? What are the work processes that produce it? So traditionally, organizations actually take a slightly different approach. They look at all of the things in which they need to accomplish, and they design processes to deliver those. And they break it down into bite-sized pieces because it is very complex. It's complex from a physical design perspective, and it's complex from an organizational design perspective. So breaking it down into consumable chunks makes sense. In doing that, you create a lot of silos. So you make it manageable to deliver outcomes, but they're not necessarily the most efficient outcomes. So what we did was we looked at it again and thought more holistically about what are we actually going after? How are we moving information to make high quality decisions first? What is the data movement to enable that? And then building the structure around that and the work processes around that, which is a slightly different approach. We, of course, couldn't stand all of that up. Like I said, we're not even operating yet. But what that enabled us to do was get really, really specific with what are the foundational capabilities we need to have available to us. So what has to be in place from day one, from a technology standpoint, from a behavioral standpoint with their organization, and from a system standpoint, like how are people going to actually engage with their work? And that was the journey that we took. So we actually had, so as you know, because you worked on this and built it for us, we had our digital asset before we had our physical asset, which is perhaps a bit of a novel approach if you look at other major capital projects in the industry. And so we were able to interact and to become familiar and to start to socialize what it was going to be like to work in this facility long before we could walk outside and see it.
It's a really fascinating, approach. We have obviously seen, I think, a trend over the past 10 years where people tend to, collect data and they build up, the sensor landscape and data platforms and so on, and then they sort of see what they can use it for. You're sort of describing the opposite approach from the onset, where you're thinking about, okay, it's going to be decisions, it's going to lead to higher performance, and then you're sort of reversing back from that. That is really, it's a novel and more sort of pointed approach. But I would imagine that when sort of breaking the mold and doing that, taking that new novel approach, you must come to some interesting outcomes on the people side, right? So tell us about this people journey. How did the people fit into that, and what were the reactions? And I guess, what kind of organization do you end up with? And is that also a new org chart that you're building? Do we extend it to that territory?
You could do. So I would say today, if you look at the organization, it's a bit more traditional in nature. And there's reasons for that. So when we did all of this work toward the end of 2019, 2020, and actually right through to the end of 2020 and early 2021, the organization that was going to operate this asset didn't yet exist. So there was only, let's say about 20 people that made up the organization, where normally there would be several hundred. So while we knew what foundational capabilities we needed to have in place, and we started to stand up those to ensure that we could do what we wanted to do, we still then had to hire the organization. We had to bring them in, and that came with, a mix of folks who have been in the industry for 35 years, folks who were fresh out of high school, folks who've been in a different industry for 25 years as well. The blueprint that we created and the organizational design that we're striving for down the road really is quite integrated. It's integrated from a data perspective. It's integrated from the work and the work processes. And to really turn all of that on at once is quite difficult. So we picked a couple of really critical starting points. And the questions we asked ourselves when we decided, where do we start on this journey, were things like, what is going to add immense value for a really critical period, i.e. commissioning and startup of the facility? What is going to add value for that time period? What are the really, really critical behaviors, those footholds that we have to build with this organization that we don't yet have, that will enable us to do more, that will create a culture and an acceptance of doing things differently? What are those footholds we need in place? And what are things that we have to do now? Because it's just going to be much more difficult and perhaps not even worthwhile to do later, because we had this great opportunity of having, a greenfield project to do things differently. So those are the types of questions we asked ourselves to help us really pinpoint the starting points to build out this puzzle. And of course, we're not operating yet. We've got a few of those critical puzzle pieces stuck together, but we have many more. There's still quite a bit of work to do on this.
Well, those are definitely some bold questions to ask when you're building an organization and you're building capabilities, right? And I'm sure there were probably some implementation challenges along the way as you introduced technology, but maybe also, organizational challenges. And maybe you could describe some of those and how you overcame them, and maybe reflect back on if there was something you would have done differently.
Yeah, absolutely. From an organizational perspective, like I said, we have our organization built up, and we have a really diverse team, which opens the door for a lot of wonderful opportunities. But from a digital performance model perspective, it means that we have people in different places, and we have to meet them where they are to help bring them along on this journey. And they are in different places. So we have folks who are very keen and interested in things like data science, and are exploring data science and taking courses in their free time and that type of thing. And that's a skill set we want to nurture and to provide support for. We have other folks who have come from different industries that may have been very, very paper driven still and more analog in nature. And while they're comfortable with technology at home, in the workplace, it's not something they're yet used to. And they may not feel comfortable asking for help as well. So, it could be with using the digital twin that we've provided them, because we've provided access to everyone in the organization, or it could be something as simple as using their standard productivity tooling that they use every day when they log into their computer. So we're working quite a bit to provide a support structure to develop all of those skills and capabilities and comfort to all of our digital tooling to help bring people to a certain kind of foundational level in the organization. And of course, how those things are designed, that user experience, the interface that we create for them, can I give you our digital twin and can you figure it out on your own? Or do I have to provide you a manual that you have to then go read and take a 6-hour course for? So these types of considerations to help people along on that journey are quite critical.
Grant, I sort of want to ask you, from a broader industry perspective, the strategies for helping to overcome some of these challenges. Like, how do we work with people to help drive this change, to adopt this type of critical technology into the operating model, but also to change the operating model?
So I think coming back to identifying those decisions and helping think through the whole spectrum for people through the organization. So picking very specific decisions that get made, and where we focus to start off with is typically the more high frequency, and we call high frequency, low value type activities, type decisions. And I use value as a proxy for simple. So if you think about having high frequency, low frequency, and low value, high value. So these high value use cases will be things like turnarounds, integrated simulation. They tend to be complex, require a lot of data sets, a lot of people, a lot of process implementation, but they generate a lot of value for an organization. If you can take a day off a turnaround, or react 7 hours faster on a critical event, it's worth a lot of money, but they don't happen very often. So by focusing on the high frequency type decisions, and this is things like shift handover, it's things like control loop tuning, and some of the instrumentation components, we identify these high frequency, relatively straightforward decisions on how to do a shift handover in the case of LNGC, where you put in front of people lots of opportunities to engage with the environment, and engage with an environment that they can see the whole loop, from understanding the framing of the decisions that they need to make and being able to make it easy for them to see the alternatives. Only bring the data in that's required for those decisions, their decisions, and to Neela's point on having a digital asset and a physical twin. So really starting to work digitally first, think digitally first, and only use the data you need. And then going the other side of having the metrics and the analytics and the logic, and linking it to the actual outcome. So from shift handover, having an environment that I can go in, where I can see, did the last shift have a good shift or not? Within 2 seconds. I can see all the context of all the isolation plans that were executed, may not have been executed. And I can see the dynamic tasks required for me in my shift. So trying to make it contained within the decisions that someone would make, and so that they can have that transparency. So we try and start with those high frequency things so they get lots of swings at bat. We learn very quickly. And then ultimately we work our way back up to more complicated, bigger decisions, more complex, low frequency, higher value opportunities. But it's very much giving people the capability in a pragmatic way that they can make good decisions, and making good decisions often provides those feedback loops for people to want to engage and they see themselves winning. So it's a positive feedback loop all around.
Okay, so really, it's really about sort of making it easier for people, making their day-to-day operating life easier, so they can focus on those higher impact items and using the digital as a lever to do so. Neela, in terms of just looking at your experience so far, what's your biggest win to date, and how do you see this sort of evolving going forward?
Yeah. So our biggest win, arguably one of the ones that was a little bit more challenging that we struggled with initially, was kind of the uptake. So we created our digital asset and we opened it up. We provided it to everyone, and it's an incredibly integrated system. So it has all of our information from our engineering data warehouse to our drawings. Everything is there, and we just opened the doors. Come explore. And admittedly, we didn't do a great job of being very proactive in the organization, but understanding how people were going to use this. What were they going to explore? What types of decisions were they going to make? And it wasn't until we actually started to engage with the workforce a little bit more that we started to realize there was these wonderful use cases that were being leveraged that we didn't have line of sight to or hadn't thought of yet. And that was really a big win for us, because we started to realize that this capability, it wasn't a specific solution for a specific problem. It was a capability we provided, had a lot more opportunity than we realized. And so one of those earlier use cases was around, our competency development program. So we do a lot of assessments to ensure that people are ready, that they're competent. And the folks had took it upon themselves to leverage the digital twin to prepare themselves for those assessments in ways that we hadn't thought of. And so as soon as we became aware of that, then we're like, oh, well, if you're doing that, then we can help teach those other, 20 odd people to do the same thing. And we can all be better at that one item. And so then we became quite a bit more proactive, and we're engaging with everyone on how are you using this? Is it the way we thought, or is there more? And there is a lot more. So that was quite a big win for us, and really helped drive a lot of the adoption within the organization. And I think, as Luke said, as you start down this journey, especially initially, it can be a bit clunky. It can feel a bit awkward. And we had those moments as well. But it really helped building the relationship with folks and sharing those success stories to open the communication paths when things did feel a bit clunky or something wasn't quite working out, for that information to come back so it could be addressed. Because we are able to address things quite quickly. We're taking an agile approach to this. So it really helped build trust within the organization on the solution that we're providing, the capability we're providing them.
Are there any, so I really fascinated about this training, the training use case, because we have been in the business of providing operator training simulators for many, many, many years, but that's specifically on the process regime. It seems like this could, create substantial current and future situational awareness for people, especially when you're building an asset. So really sort of appreciate that example. Are there sort of other big aha moments you had that you want to highlight, that maybe you have some advice for people who are about to step into this same journey?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one in particular that we had probably mid 2022, I'll say. And it's a bit more broad than just focusing internally on our own organization. We engaged with a number of other operators in the industry. We also engaged with a number of other service providers and things like that. We had big discussions about, where is it that you think you want to be? What do you see as the big challenges? And we're all solving the same problems. We've all done the same thing. When I mentioned earlier about breaking down how this all comes together into siloed processes so that it's understandable and consumable, and we can actually manage this complex thing, we have all done that. And we are all now trying to undo that, because we have the capability to make it a little bit less complex with how we manage our information and data through digital technologies. And admittedly, we're perhaps trying to solve problem 2 or 3 and they're solving 4 or 5, but we're all solving the same problems, and fundamentally we all require the same capabilities to do it. And we can really partner and share our stories and share our learnings to really drive a lot more efficiency in kind of getting to that end game. So keeping that conversation open, being really curious to share with each other what we are able to share as much as we can, will really accelerate really all of our journeys. So that is the one thing that I would say, if you're looking to go on this journey, have a lot of conversations with folks who have started it as well. You'll probably learn quite a bit more than you expect.
Fantastic. I can say from our perspective that we absolutely see the emergence of industry ecosystems, collaboration arenas, and people coming together to transform industry as a more holistic trend. So definitely, that is definitely resonating with me. Grant, do you have any aha moments to share?
Yeah, I think, echoing with what Neil has said, the challenge of how to digitize your organization, how to use digital where it's really strong, and we're all emerging and learning how to do this as an industry, in multiple industries. I think for me, a couple of aha moments are really around where to get started, and it's the counterintuitive segment of high frequency, low value. So thinking of ways where the organization can engage early and often, and helping declutter the workforce with providing them with a way to make better decisions that are transparent, that are easier, make the organization work better. So that's definitely one of the aha moments. And then the second one is, you can't starting early is, obviously if you're in a green field, is a privilege, and being able to take that to upstream, even putting it into the basis of design is probably where the industry is going to go. But in the brownfield area, just rather than starting off with trying to change everything in someone's life and, trying to solve world hunger with your digital solutions, digital is extremely good at providing transparency. It's extremely good at allowing you to copy paste, where you've got, repeatable solutions. And it's really good at analytics. So starting at those solutions that help people declutter their day, those high frequency things that they may not be making decisions, or the default decisions, and bringing smarts into those pieces to make them, do a better job, help them do a better job, give them more time and space so that they can make higher quality decisions in the things that they're actually doing. So those would be the points that I would leave.
Excellent. So in terms of the change and the big choice of doing this, this is obviously not easy, and just reflecting on what Luke said in the last webinar, you mentioned it, Neil, it's clunky initially, it's awkward, difficult. There's different levels of response from people who have a lot of experience to people who don't have experience. Maybe they're open to start fresh and do new things more easily. But I also remember Luke talking about the necessity of saying that this is the future, and we are all in this together, and we're actually going to do this. We're going to make this a deliberate step forward. And there's, and I think he said you have to make it a must do. There's no turning back, with a lot of expectations also from partners like us, for example. So I'm very curious, why do you believe that this is the future? Neela, this is the future of industry.
Yeah, I would argue it's not the future. I would argue it's now. So what I equate it to, if you look at, and you don't have to look to another industry. Look at your daily life. Look from the time your alarm goes off in the morning till you get to your office or you get to work. how many times have you interacted and used digital solutions and technologies, and how integrated are those? You know, if I'm driving in, does your phone know your driving habits? Does it know the traffic around you? And does it very accurately predict exactly what time you're going to walk into the front door and sit down at your cubicle? There's a really good chance that that's true. If you then turn on your computer and you're not leveraging technology to that same level, you're probably behind. So our industry really is there. We're facing, you know, the digital transformation. We're facing things like the climate crisis. These are big transformative forces that are acting upon us. And if we don't react with them and solve those problems, then yeah, we absolutely will be left behind. So there's a certain element of, yes, we want to make higher quality decisions. We want to take away those non-value add tasks for our people because we want work to be engaging and all of those things. But at the same time, there's that element of, oh yeah, no, this is not actually optional. This is how we must do things. This is how we have to go forward, because the alternative is not a great story.
Wonderful. Grant, why is DPM the future?
I think, you know, there's a really interesting study in Forbes on the success, financial success of companies on the exchange, and it correlation, causation, but basically 95% of the performance can be linked back to quality decisions. So, and companies are really a collection of the decisions that they make. So fundamentally, companies that make faster, higher quality decisions win. And this is what got me really excited about with LNGC. It's not about just building a West Coast LNG facility. It's about building the world-class LNG facility that happens to be on the West Coast of Canada. And, you know, make that the new standard for the rest of the world to follow. So I think once you start building in the digital performance model and enabling high quality, faster decisions across the board, and as Neela said, using the same, if not, you know, more technology from your you know, kitchen table to your desk, from your desk to the end of the day, you know, the companies that embrace that and take that on and get their workforce engaged in that way are just going to win. So I think it really is, as Neil said, it is now. This is what you need to do, and the speed is only going to increase. So it's not a case of the being the fast follower, as it were. I think you need to be the fast adopter now. So it is the future.
Call to action, right? That's what is going through my head right now. How can we enable these things in the best possible way so it's easy to make those decisions? Neela, reflecting on today, do you have some things that you'd like to share, some closing remarks regarding a digital performance model, how it's valuable, and how they can provide a path to access the future?
Yeah, I'd like to close a little bit by going back and talking about the people component of it a little bit. It's really easy to get caught up in the uncertainty. It's really easy to get caught up in I'm not sure where to start. I don't know if this is the right starting point. My advice and our experience has been, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you do have to start. You do just have to kind of jump into the deep end and get going. From a cultural perspective, what will make that successful is your ability to see failure, to adapt and pivot when it happens, and to also recognize success. So it's quite easy to get caught up from time to time and feeling like you're not really making those gains. And we hear it all the time when we talk to other folks that, I've done this and I have failed, and now I don't know what to do. Look back at your journey. Where did you start? Because I suspect there's a number of successes that you've experienced. Recognize those and celebrate them. It's critical from an organizational perspective, from a culture, to do that so you can continue to charge forward in your journey. Those are the points I think that I would leave with folks. It's not going to be perfect. You will not be perfect in the end, but it's that progress that's quite important.
Oh, that's a fantastic summary. And of course, what we hear a lot is, it's not, the sentiment is shifting from a project to a process, right? So digitalization seems to be this continuous process. Of course, then we have to show the results as we go along the way. So there's a few questions here that have come in, and I want to pick one that touches a little bit upon this. How do we reach? How are we going to be successful with this? Here's one, and Neil, I'll ask you because perhaps you can relate. It says our organization has collected over 100 business requirements for becoming a digital organization. How do I prioritize, and where should I get started? So back to getting started again. Are there particular use cases that I should prioritize?
And there probably are. So there's a bit of a balance. So there's the balance in the couple of quick wins. So within your organization, you want to build up a bit of confidence. So attack something that's not, boiling the ocean. You're not solving world hunger. It's a problem that you can provide a solution to and build up some confidence with your organization to then continue to do more. But also take a close look at those 100 items. Likely there's a common capability that will solve a whole bunch of those. And being able to distill all of those problems down into a handful of problems that probably have even fewer solutions to solve them makes it much easier to address and to take on. It's actually arguably where we have found ourselves, maybe 10 years ago, where we have too many solutions. They're not integrated. And now where I thought I was providing value and making life easier, it's actually just as complex as it has always been. So really take a close, critical eye to fundamentally what are my problems, and what is the one or two solutions that I can use to address a number of those.
Fantastic. This leads directly into the next question, actually, which I'm going to ask Grant this time. So it says, I'm a few years into my digitalization journey. We have rolled out IoT sensors. I've built some business applications, but the results are not what we expected. We're now hitting the reset button. What advice do you have regarding moving to a DPM, considering our existing investment?
Yeah, so I'm gonna pick up a little bit from where Neela, because I think Neela laid the groundwork for the solution on this one, which is often people, when they think about digitization, they think about digitizing all their data, and it invariably and often goes to, I need more sensors, more data, and that can lead into issues with maintenance and it takes an incredible amount of discipline to maintain the data quality, and adding more data, doesn't make that discipline capability easier. So with a lot of companies in this position, and there are a lot of them, I think that it's not necessarily about a reset, but the next step opportunity is to actually look through the common capabilities, those common high frequency type problems where I can then close the loop. And so I can identify, from the data pattern to action to output, and close the loop and get those going to generate those quick wins, to generate the value component, and then work your way back into, fundamentally it's looking at the decisions, high frequency, what data do I need to make that decision, and then focus on, closing the loop on those components, get those quick wins, and then come back and address what data and what IoT you really need. And I think, going forward, assets of the future are going to require probably less IoT, more analytics. But yeah, so in short, break it down, high frequency decisions, identify the common thread capabilities that you're really trying to solve, and then solve those end to end.
So this one is going to be the last question, and it's going to be yours, Neela. So digitalization is essential to our business strategy. What key qualities should we look for in partners on our digital journey, and what should we expect from them?
Yeah, absolutely. So to keep the thread going on that common capabilities, you really want to target a partner that deeply understands their superpower. So there's a lot of organizations out there that can create specific solutions to any number of problems you throw at them. But if they don't understand what capability they're bringing in, and in the context of the digital twin, that ability to integrate otherwise siloed pieces of information and data to be able to make a decision, that data integration capability is the superpower of the twin. If I deeply understand that, now I can also translate and understand how I'm going to solve a whole pile of problems or issues or drive better decision making within your organization. But if I come to a partner and I say, I have this one problem, I can't predict when this pump is going to fail, can you provide me a solution for that? And they don't understand what their capability is, they will provide you a really bespoke solution for that single problem. And you're going to struggle to really make leaps and gains down the road. That's what I'd put out there. Make sure you partner with someone who understands their capability and can then apply it a number of different ways and are interested in doing that with you, of course.
Fantastic. Yeah, those are all great insights. And we're, of course, as Kongsberg Digital, extremely happy to be involved in this journey as well. And with that, I do want to thank the panelists. I think we had some really good insights here today, ranging from how many elephants equate to an LNG tank to really change management, the people aspect, and how you insert the technology into a strategic operating model or performance model that can drive a better quality decision making. So some fantastic range of topics and advice here that I'm sure our viewers will be very happy with. So in summary then, the current approach to digitalization in the energy industry is struggling to deliver meaningful scale and the promised impact. And as operations and governance becomes even more complex and data becomes even more critical and strategic, the strategic end-to-end digital performance model is the only viable way for a company to apply digital to maximize scale and impact. Companies using a strategic DPM are achieving the digital promise today. And at Kongsberg Digital, we have witnessed the exponential value digitalization delivers at scale by transforming up to 15 assets per year for some of the world's largest oil and gas companies. By embracing a DPM, companies can realize substantial return on asset gains, including double-digit reductions in OPEX and engineering costs. Rapid, informed decision-making enabled by a holistic end-to-end approach is fast becoming the most important competitive advantage for businesses today and will only become more critical. When it comes to digital, ultimately the choice is yours. You can stick with a tactical digitalization and digital ceilings, or you can transform how you work and how work is done with the operating model of the future and achieve those exponential returns. And with that, I turn it back to the Upstream host.
Thanks, Havard, for taking us through this webinar. You've been a great host throughout both sessions. And thank you to both our speakers, Grant Christie and Neela Mark, for their insights today. This concludes our second webinar in this two-part series on the operating model of the future. In part one, we talked about why organizations are moving to the operating model of the future, a digital performance model. Today's discussion carried this conversation forward by focusing on how you can achieve the digital promise today by putting a digital performance model in place. We encourage you to watch the recording from the first event if you missed it, and share the recordings from both events with your peers and colleagues. You can also read an article that shares more regarding why industry leaders are moving to the operating model of the future by visiting the sponsored content section of the Upstream website. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.